has ignited something across this country where people are tired of the tyranny of judicial action that takes people's freedoms away, takes their basic fundamental constitutional rights and puts them in jeopardy. I told Kim today that I feel like she's shown more courage than most any politician I know and most every pastor I know, because she's not only said something, she's been willing to put her life at risk.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to the Wednesday edition of the Steve Malzberg Show from our New York City studios. And that, of course, was Governor Mike Huckabee, who really was such an integral part of what happened yesterday in Kentucky, and with Kim Davis getting released from prison, and the governor of the former governor of the state of Arkansas, presidential candidate Mike Huckabee joins us. Hello, sir.
Steve, great to be back on the show.
Well, it's always great to talk to you. Boy, I mean, that had to be an emotional moment for you. You were planning to go there, planning to meet with her in prison. You had no idea when you made those arrangements and were heading there and maybe even got there that she was getting out, did you?
Oh, of course not. We had no idea. We thought we were going, and we had planned this rally as soon as we found out she had gone to jail, because we thought it's just such a miscarriage of justice to put an elected clerk in jail for not only carrying out her conscience, but even more importantly, carrying out the only law that she had in front of her, and the law under which she was elected, which was that marriage means one man, one woman. So we went there to rally people to say, look, this is a seminal watershed moment of American history when you start putting people in jail because they disagree with homosexual marriage. And anyway, that morning, apparently the judge, I don't know if it was because of the pressure, I have no idea why, I can't get into his head, but he said he would release her. So by the time we got there, she was ready to be released, and she was able to walk out on that stage and thank the over 5,000 people who gathered in Carter County to cheer her on.
You made so many great points. You know, I watched Morning Joe today while you were talking about this, and I got to tell you, and then you were up for it, and you said bring it on because you're a pastor. You know, I don't know, turning this into, well, Jesus, you know, really didn't talk about gays and gay marriage. Well, you made the great point, which is so obvious, not to detract from it, but that it wasn't an issue back then. But to this kind of warped logic that Joe especially, and then Mika, who I thought attacked you, were going after you on this by trying to talk about what, you know, first of all, she was married 4 times, and secondly, with what Joe dominated with what Jesus spoke about more than not spoke about, that really is almost a red herring to this issue, is it not?
Well, it is. Frankly, Steve, if Jesus spoke to it one time, it's all he has to do for it to be the word of Jesus, you know?
Well,
but
you know about that more than I do. I'm Jewish, but go ahead.
Well, that's my point. But I mean, anyone who's a Christian follower knows that Jesus doesn't have to say it 15 times for it to be a statement of truth. But the bigger point that I made to Joe was that the only time he addressed marriage, which he did address it, by the way, I've heard people say Jesus said nothing about it. He most certainly did. And I quoted that verse to Joe, and I explained to him that Jesus said that a man shall leave his mother and father, and a woman shall leave her home, and the two shall become one flesh. By the way, he's quoting the Old Testament law, and you know that, being Jewish.
Right.
The point being is that this was the only form of marriage that existed in that time. Same-sex marriage was not being discussed in the first century. It's only been discussed in modern and recent times as in terms of making it official. And that's why I think that was a ridiculous kind of position to take. Even so, even if the whole world says that this is what we ought to do, the question comes, do we have a constitution to follow or not? And does that constitution specify 3 separate but equal branches of government, one of which cannot simply dictate to the other 2? And that's been my consistent point from the beginning of this,
right,
is that the Supreme Court cannot make law. They just don't have that authority.
Well, I wish everybody agreed with you and was as like-minded with you on that, because it is frightening, especially if, God forbid, we get a couple of more liberal justices on that Supreme Court. The country, as you said in not these words, basically will be done. I really believe that. I mean,
I believe that too, Steve. Yeah. I mean, if we lose the idea that we ultimately are governed by the people, and we now surrender to the judicial branch of government, then we are under what Thomas Jefferson
judicial tyranny
strongly warned against. So that's exactly right, judicial tyranny. And I think we need to understand that That's what we are approaching in this country when people say, well, court ruled. They just burped out a 5-4 decision, which, by the way, was completely irrational.
Right.
And they didn't have a thing constitutionally to stand on when they made it other than made up words like intimacy and spirituality. And somehow that's the end of it.
No.
Roberts, in the dissent, said it so brilliantly. If this is the case, then 320 million people in America are no longer being governed by their laws, but they're being governed by 5 unelected lawyers.
Absolutely. Okay, let's move on. Before we leave this and move on to something else, I do want to say I've heard you ask this a couple of times today, and you answered it, but I want to press you. We go back a long way. I'm going to run a video now of Ted Cruz, who was at that event yesterday, and from all indications was trying to get up on stage. And you could see clearly in what we're showing you here, you can't see it though, you can take the volume out, take the sound out, thank you, that he was blocked several times and was not happy about it from trying to get up on stage. Was that, did you know about that, or was he welcome on stage?
Well, Steve, this was our event. My team put it together. We're the ones who recruited the people not only to be on the program, but we're the ones who coordinated the effort. We're the ones who secured the permits, the staging. We had no idea Ted Cruz was even going to show up until the day before. And he didn't call us. He called several other people on the program and asked about it.
Right.
Of course, anybody's welcome. It's a free rally. He can come, but he's not free to come to an event that we're putting together and invite himself on the program any more than I could go a few weeks ago to his event in Des Moines and just show up and expect to be able to be a speaker.
Gotcha. Fair enough.
I mean, it's real simple.
Yeah, okay.
I did invite him, by the way, back to visit with Kim Davis.
Right.
And made that possible for him. I thought that was pretty gracious to say, look, it's not your event, but here you go.
Fair enough. Let me ask you about Donald Trump. He came out and he said that the U.S. has to take in these quote-unquote Syrian refugees. He didn't say how many, but we have to do something. He said that last night. What do you think about that? There are people like the head of the Center for Security Policy, Frank Gaffney, who warns that this is dangerous and that ISIS and other terrorists could sneak in among the others who are coming in.
Well, first of all, I think there's a difference between offering humanitarian aid where we provide food and we provide some temporary shelters and medical care in their countries where they are or where they're escaping to. But whether or not we're going to airlift thousands of people and we have no idea, are they true refugees running away from terror, or are they people who just are looking for a way to build a better life? And there's a difference between a refugee and an immigrant. And we don't know, are these refugees? Are some of them immigrants? We don't have an obligation to just open our doors. And I think there's a difference between humanitarian aid and also bringing people here, and we have no idea who they are and for what purpose they're coming.
So Trump is wrong when he says we need to take some in here.
I'm never going to get into it with who's right, who's wrong. There are a lot of candidates on the stage. I'll just tell you what I think and let people make their own conclusions.
Okay. And you did. All right, right and wrong. Hillary, I don't know if you've heard her quote-unquote apology. It's a turnaround, of course. She apologized for using, two email, or should have used two. She only used one. Have you heard it? Do you think it's sincere? Is it good enough?
Well, it's interesting. The day before, she said she had nothing to apologize for. Then the next day, she apologizes for something she didn't need to apologize for. This is the ever-growing Clinton controversy. She's not as slick as her husband. That's one thing we have to recognize. He could make it sound like he told the truth both days. She's not able to do that. She's just not that slick. The result being, I think she's in a world of hurt, and this continues to unravel clearly. This is, if you want to say, Kim Davis was a Democrat that got put in jail, they may have put the wrong Democrat female in jail.
That's a great way to leave it. It's MikeHuckabee.com. Of course, we'll all be watching on the debate next week. Good luck on that, sir, and great to talk to you again.
Thank you, Steve.
Take care. Mike Huckabee, ladies and gentlemen. Very interesting, very interesting. Also, that he wouldn't say Donald Trump was wrong, and that's a decent strategy. Not to mention, other candidates. Just go with your own at this point. We're coming back. The panel has a lot to talk about, and we will. Don't go away.